Welcome again to Coastal Matters. I'm Charlie Walters. This show is a co-production of the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy and Nantucket Community Television Channel 18. Dave Gagnon is here with me today. He is the Executive Director of the Maria Mitchell Association. Maria Mitchell was, of course, an astronomer, but the association that bears her name also has a marine component, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Thanks, Dave.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Charlie.
First of all, how does an astronomer with an association named after her end up with a marine component to that association?
Sure. Well, Maria Mitchell was really much more than an astronomer. She was truly a scientist, and a great observer of nature, and she was passionate about teaching people and getting them passionate about learning about the environment around them. She took copious notes and took a lot of information about what was going on in the world around her, not just in the skies, but also what was on Nantucket.
Now, your offices are up on Vestal Street,
Yeah.
and one of the observatories is there, and the Hinchman House is on the corner of Vestal and Milk. But let's go right down to Washington Street and tell us what's down there.
Great. Well, we have an aquarium down there. We love our little aquarium. We say little. It is very compact, and but I would say it has so much to see in that space. I think at one point we have a release day every year where kids come in and they release the fish from the aquarium, and I think we counted over 400 specimens were in those tanks.
You're taking them from the tank and putting them in the harbor? Is that what you're
That's
talking
right.
about?
Yeah.
And what are some of those 400 species?
Yeah. Well, we have a whole range. Really, the species that you'll find at our aquarium are representative of what you'll find out either in the harbor or the ocean surrounding Nantucket in the summertime. We also get species that come in the summertime that are called orphans. And these are the ones that are brought up in the Gulf Stream and make their way into Nantucket Harbor or around Nantucket. And that's always very exciting as well.
So some of the things you have in the building, obviously they're not going to be huge. You don't have a dolphin in the building,
No
for
dolphin,
example.
although
But
people would
what,
love to have a dolphin.
But what do you have?
Like we'll have dogfish, we'll have striped bass that come in. All sorts of crabs we'll have. We have jellyfish, moon jellyfish, that we have and collected off in the harbor close to the aquarium. We get a lot of our specimens come in thanks to the cooperation of the local fishermen. They really work with us, and like Critter Cruises, for instance, will bring in specimens for us in the summertime. We have relations with other aquarium, including the New England Aquarium and the Cape Cod Museum of Natural History. And we'll trade specimens. We had a seahorse last year. We overwintered, and that'll go back into our tanks this year as well.
So there are seahorses in Nantucket waters?
Yeah, there are.
How big?
They're about this big, maybe. Yeah.
And where might one find those in the wild?
You know, we have found them in different places. We actually had a girl who was, 10, 12 years old, found one down in Matticat. I love this. She rode her bike. She was very involved with Maria Mitchell, was really passionate about the work that we did, but she rode her bike with her family to Matticat to hang out on the beach, and she found a seahorse that had washed up, put it into a container with salt water, got on her bike. The family didn't want to leave. I think they had already settled in for the day, and she biked back, came to the Maria Mitchell Aquarium, and we had that seahorse for quite a long time until we released it.
I had no idea there were seahorses around there. That's fascinating.
It's kind of astounding, actually.
Well, now the creatures you have in there, how do you get most of those? Does the staff of Maria Mitchell go out and pick those up, or are you relying on the public to bring things in?
Well, I'd say we get a few things from the public. We get things from those fishermen and from the different organizations that work with us. And they're really excited to donate things to the aquarium, especially in the spring, late spring. I think one of the other interesting things about the aquarium is that we'll get specimens in. We might get a dogfish that came in. Maybe there'd been a dogfish there for a month already. We'll get another specimen about the same size, perfect size for the aquarium, and we'll release the first one that we had. So we sort of think of them as visitors to our aquarium, and they get to go back out and they get released.
Now, in the wintertime, what goes on in that building?
Nothing at all.
Is it close up for the winter,
It is.
or
We-
just
no,
it
we
isn't
ju-
just the public not allowed to go in? It is not functioning.
No, we totally button it up, and so the springtime it's all about starting up, getting the specimens in there, and in the fall we're closing everything down. Like I said, there's a few that we'll keep over if we do have a seahorse or something else that we want to. We have a couple of interesting rare lobsters, calico lobster, for instance, that we got in, and we'll keep that through the winter and then use it again in the springtime.
Talk
But there's
about that
very few.
lobster.
So
I mean, people think of lobsters as the thing you see in the grocery store to take home, but
Right.
what's a calico lobster?
Well, it just
what's a
has a-
blue lobster, et cetera?
yeah, it has it has that pattern on the outside, and they're very, very rare. I'm not sure if, but it's in the one in the many millions of category for the calico lobster. So it's very unusual. And what we'll find is when a lobsterman finds something like that, they know that it's very rare, and it would really be a shame to just bring it to the shop. And so they'll give it to us to show the public, and it's a great story because we can talk about it, talk about genetic differences and different types of lobster and what you might expect to see or not expect to see. So
Let's stick with that for a minute. Aside from the color, how are they different from other lobsters?
it's really just the color. So
Just the
that's
color.
the thing that distinguishes them from others. So it's the patterns that they exhibit on the side. It's part of their particular genetics that you'll see that particular trait. So
Now, is that something you find in other area waters? I mean, would you find it in Maine?
yeah,
For example?
I don't think the variation is unique to Nantucket area waters, but I think that it's something that rarely occurs in nature, and it's something that's fun to highlight because then you can talk about it's something interesting and different.
Now, you've been here how long?
3 years now.
That's a short space of time. Are you noticing differences in what sorts of animals you're seeing?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't think I've noticed anything really different in that space of time, and it's an interesting question, especially in terms of some of those orphan species that come up.
You haven't noticed you're getting more of species A or less of species B or whatever.
Yeah.
It is a short space of time.
It is a short space of time. I think the invasive green crabs are something that we're interested in studying, and it's something that we see a lot of, but we're just collecting some baseline data now on that.
Briefly talk about the green crabs, because that's a recent,
Yeah.
or it's either a recent development or it's just recently being paid attention to.
Right. I think it's probably both of those things, but it's something that is impactful to the environment here, and it's something that we're really interested. So the work we did last year was really to try to get a handle on what are the populations, get a really initial handle on what are the populations like, and really work out some sampling methodologies, marking methodologies on the green crabs so that we could continue those studies over time. So it's very, very preliminary at this point.
Is it good or bad to have them here, or do we know that yet?
It's really not good to have them here. They really are an invasive species, and they take over. They're pretty aggressive. They are actually edible, which is interesting, and you can maybe even on our website get a copy of a green crab recipe. It's really not unlike others, but they're pretty small. You need a lot of them to make a crab cake.
How small is small?
Well, I mean, the ones I've seen are, about this big or so.
Well, it's not that
on the
small.
largest size, So
So they're invasive, and what do they do? I mean, they're eating up, they're causing shortages of other species in the waters?
that's right. They take over for some of the other crabs that you'll see on island in the harbor. So they're just very aggressive. They reproduce quickly, and they are big consumers.
What other sorts of crabs does one see around here?
Yeah, well, you might see the calico crab, or we do see some blue crabs as well on island. We have those in our tanks, and we were doing some interesting studies looking at blue crabs and green crabs together to see what might happen there. I believe that there was some work done in the past and where they talked about blue crabs actually consuming green crabs, but I don't think we saw that this summer. We had a really small sample size, so it's really a lot of, I think with the way experiments are set up, there's a lot of preliminary work you do, and and sort of test out different theories. And that's some of what we do at Mariah Mitchell at the aquarium in the summertime.
I think of blue crabs as the creatures that children get out at the bridge on the Matica Road.
That's right.
That's the same thing you see in the harbor, I assume. And
Yeah.
I guess they're getting to Long Pond through that waterway, for lack of a better word, that
Right.
connects that pond to Matica Harbor. Is that how they're getting in
right.
there?
Yeah, that's how I would assume that they would come in. I've actually seen them out at Pocomo as well, Pocomo Beach, down towards the marshes.
How long has Mariah Mitchell owned that building on Washington Street?
Oh gosh, I don't know that I know exactly how long it's been, but it's been there probably at least 20 years. And from what I understand, the aquarium was in different places over time. It was actually on the Nantucket Lightship basket, not Lightship basket, the Lightship boat. There was the Mariah Mitchell Aquarium at one point. There were some tanks in there, and people would come on board and check out some of the local aquatic life.
And just so people know exactly where it is, it's towards the beginning of Washington Street, but I don't know the number.
Yeah, it's 33 Washington Street.
Yeah, and as you're going out of town, it's on the left. It's appropriate enough right on the harbor.
That's right. Yeah, we have we have one touch tank there. We have a rather large circular tank out in the back. We have 2 buildings that have tanks in there. We have lots and lots of interns and volunteers that come in and work through the summertime to make the visitor experience. We'll get almost 9,000 people that go through there, 9,000 people that come through there in the summertime.
Really?
Really, depending on the weather.
And it's open to the public. You don't have to be a member of,
That's
hopefully
right.
you're a member of the association, but
hopefully.
you don't have to be.
That's right. If you're a member, you get in for free. If you're not, you have to pay. So.
If I don't ask you this, somebody will ask me why I didn't ask it. Flooding, is that building raised off the ground?
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I've been there through every one of the floods in 3 years, and no water's ever come into those buildings. So yes, it's raised slightly. The land
Really?
is slightly higher there, and it is somewhat perched above that. So we have not been directly impacted by water there. The parking lot is not much of a parking lot, but a 3-car parking lot has certainly been flooded most recently.
I want to talk more about water, but before we do that, tell us about your personal background. Where did you grow up?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Attleboro, Massachusetts.
Not too far from here.
Away. That's right. Spent a lot of time on the ocean, a lot of time outside. I went off to the University of Massachusetts and my major there was environmental science with a focus on limnology.
Is this in Amherst or
Study of
Boston?
wakes in Amherst. Was there for 4 years. Then I got a master's degree from from Yale University, the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. My focus was on environmental studies, and that was a 2-year program. Loved it there. Had a lot of great experience. Then went off and did environmental consulting work. So I worked in the hazardous waste field, cleaning up nasty sites all over the country, actually. And then started my own business in Brattleboro, Vermont. So I moved from Attleboro to Brattleboro. And lived there for a long time. Worked for the Organic Trade Association for 15 years, where I was the chief operating officer there, and did a lot of international promotion of U.S. organic products overseas.
And you ended up on Nantucket. How?
I did.
And why?
Well, I'll tell you, 30 years ago or so, when I was at the University of Massachusetts, I worked with a graduate student botanist, Robert Zarimba. Some people may know him. He lived out on Lost Farm, the Audubon property off of Hummock Pond Road. And I worked there for a summer, spent a lot of time out in the moors and counting branches on scrub oak trees and acorns and whatnot. It was a really great summer, and spent a lot of time in the Mariah Mitchell Science Library. We had collected specimens and brought them back to Mariah Mitchell. So I knew of the Mariah Mitchell Association, and I knew how respected an organization it was, and loved being sort of involved with it then. And I saw an opportunity come up 3.5 years ago, and applied.
So obviously you're an administrator, being the head of staff, but most of your background is in science.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So as an executive director, you get involved in all aspects of the organization, from fundraising to, direct operations, events, promotion of the organization. I think one of the things that I was really excited about when I came on board was to be able to spend the time to let people know what we were doing. We put together I don't know if you've ever seen it, but we put together a harbor, sort of a summary of 10 years of research done by both Mariah and Mitchell Association as well as other organizations where we've partnered with them or they've done their own projects. So we compiled those and put that together. I think that was really important to let people know what we do.
This is a glossy magazine with a bluish cover.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's great work. I have seen that.
Yeah. So when I get involved on the science side, I'm able to get involved. I work with our astronomer. Certainly not doing astronomy research, but certainly supporting her program. And I learned I've learned so much about astronomy since I've been here. And I've got to do some field work as well. We have a horseshoe crab study that happens every springtime. As a matter of fact, I saw the sign-up sheets going around. We actually go out. We're working with other organizations as well. We're not the lead on that, but we supply some of the field people to go out, including our staff. I go out as well, and we do counts. We do counts of horseshoe crabs, and during their mating season out here.
How big is your staff?
We have 9 full-time people on staff, and in the summertime that swells to about 40.
40 people in the summertime, really?
It does, and that includes, and I'm talking about our interns primarily, so we have about 27 interns that come in, and then others some part-time staff that come in, and they support our camp programs or discovery programs that we do for children. We have about 600 kids that go through that program. The interns really run the aquarium with the help of our full-time staff, and as well as the Mitchell House and the Natural History Museum, and of course the observatories.
Let's go back to the harbor.
Yeah.
Water quality.
Yeah.
What can you tell us from your observations about the water quality in Nantucket Harbor?
Yeah.
Anywhere around Nantucket, for that matter.
Sure. We haven't done any direct measurements of the water quality. Of course, anytime you get this type of development around a harbor, you're always going to be worried about both point and non-point sources of pollution going into the harbor. And with that comes, as you're adding more nutrients into the harbor, you're getting some of the algae that forms. The algae attaches to the eelgrass. The eelgrass is important, for instance, for the scallop industry because that's part of their life cycle, right? The scallops need that eelgrass to kind of crawl up and be protected. So I think all of those things are always a concern. The overuse of herbicides and pesticides on lawns and fertilizers in particular that are getting discharged into the harbor. And I think the work that's been done is great, and I think a lot of awareness still needs to be done. But we'd always, it's such an important resource for us here. It's why people come out to Nantucket to look at this beautiful harbor, to eat some of those wonderful scallops and oysters and clams and fish. And so I think, that for us, I think our role is really to educate people about all the great things that are out there and continue to talk about some of the issues. One of the projects we've been very involved with is the issue of plastics.
Yes. In
the harbor as well as in the oceans. And it's a major, major issue. It's something that I think people don't realize until you really start paying attention. But even out here, 30 miles out in the ocean, you walk along the beaches and there's rope and plastic and parts of lobster nets and mesh. And those are
not just the beaches.
Yeah, you're right. Everywhere. So, and it's a huge problem. I love that Nantucket doesn't allow plastic bags because that's a huge problem. When you think about the fish and the mammals that are swimming in our harbor or outside, these plastic bags and these plastic articles, they can look a lot like fish, something to eat.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. Is the sea turtles will go and they'll start munching on and swallowing some of this plastic, and it kills them. Or you get entanglements. There are people that work on the island on that as well. So one of the awareness projects we did last year and the year before was to hire somebody that does an artist who does upsculpting, and she actually uses those plastics to build whales. And we had an auction with those whales, and we display those whales around the island in the summertime. And it's a way for us to talk about, everything used in those sculptures are taken from the beaches found on Nantucket. So it's a great way to show people all the plastic trash that ends up in the ocean and ends up on our beaches and in the stomachs of animals or entangled.
It seems about every day I'm seeing something on Facebook where they've taken a sea creature,
Yeah.
a dead one, and they open up its stomach, and it's unbelievable how much
Yeah.
stuff they get in their system and then can't get rid of.
Yeah. Yeah.
I assume you work with the town natural resource department,
Yeah.
or at least you
Yeah.
are connected in some way or another.
Correct.
What sorts of things, how do you interact with them, for example?
Well, we're really excited this year. We're working with the town on a Stop the Straw campaign. And that's something we actually got support from CARE of Cape Cod and the Islands this year. So we got a grant to put promotional materials together, working with local restaurants and others on island, the general public on island, to talk. We thought we could focus on straws. It's something that's entirely not necessary to use plastic straws. You can use paper, you can use at home, you can use stainless steels. And what we like to tell people too is when you're at home, very few people pull out a straw when they're having a Coke or something. And we're saying, at a restaurant, do you really need to have a straw or a plastic straw? So we've had a great response, and the restaurants are looking at finding alternatives, mostly either paper or providing stainless steel to the customers. But mostly paper straws as a replacement for plastic straws, or just people saying, I really don't need a straw. And I think that's exciting because it is interesting when you walk around Nantucket after the water starts rushing up and flooding, coming backwards through this through the sewer grates. You'll see plastic straws all over the place, and somehow they manage to make their way out. People have them walking on the road, and they drop out, and they end up and then they end out in the ocean, and they get ingested. So
They don't decompose for some amazingly long period
hundreds
of time.
and hundreds of years, if not even. Yeah.
Talk about some of the other groups with whom you have contact of one kind or another, local groups.
Sure. Well, we really work with almost all. So we do a science festival in the wintertime, and that allows us to work in particular with a lot of the local groups, the Nantucket Conservation Foundation, of course. We work with the Land Council, Nantucket Land Council. They're actually one of our major sponsors of this festival that we do in the winter. We had almost 400 people that came to that festival at the high school gym in March this year. It's a huge
In March,
crowd.
that's a lot of people.
It's one of the biggest crowds I think the island sees that time of year, and it's certainly our biggest public event. But it's really fun because we bring out all these different interactive science projects for kids, and you'll see kids all the way up to high school there. And many of the high school kids are working with the younger kids and running some of the tables and either doing robots or doing acid-base studies or looking at mirrors and doing some astronomy. We actually have some astronomy work that they're able to do, and that's combined with the community school, for instance, we work with to put this on. So I think that the land bank, we're working on a project right now for a science-based playground. So I feel like in the Athenaeum we do some talks out there, and this kind of the list goes on and on. The Whaling Museum, we have a special exhibit on Mariah Mitchell coming up this year. So I think that the work that we do with those other groups really enhances our ability to reach out to a lot of people. And I think, they work with us, we work with them, and it just sort of multiplies the reach that we have.
Well, it's one of the interesting things about being in a small town, or this small town. There are a lot of people and organizations who work on parallel roads, working in general towards the same thing, and yet they all work together at the same time because Group A will emphasize this, Group B will emphasize something else.
That's right.
But it all comes together one way or another.
Yeah.
The Hinchman House, I want to at least mention. That's, there is a marine component to the Hinchman House. Tell us where that is and what it is and how the marine angle fits in.
Sure. I think at least right now, and this will soon change, but well, for one thing, we have the Natural History Museum, which does have components of, like, for instance, part of a whale skeleton in there, so you can go in and actually observe that up close. The other thing that's, I think, really unique about the Hinchman House on Vestal Street is we have almost 10,000 specimens in our collection there that have been collected over 100 years.
10,000?
10,000.
And they're all in that one building?
They're all in that one building. They're actually getting moved in very shortly, and they're going to go to the former Mariah Mitchell Library, Science Library. We've built a air quality controlled area there in the basement that we're going to store all these specimens in. We've got new cabinets coming in the next week or two. And we're really excited that these specimens, and the specimens include a whole array, both coastal plants, includes algae specimens, it includes actual animals that have been brought into the museum and this is over 100 years. This is not just in the last 10 years. The collection really goes along. We have birds, we have insects, we have spiders, and we just have it's a huge collection. And it really is the biological collection of Nantucket Island. And it's just something that has been used by scientists and is currently used by scientists. Groups will come down, for instance, Harvard will come down and they'll look at some of our specimens. We'll trade some with them. And it's important to have that because we can go back and look over time. Was this particular creature here 50 years ago? We can go to our specimens and see whether it actually exists or not. If so, how many were here, or what was the type? We might do DNA samples if someone's doing a study to look at changes over time. Or you could sample for pesticides or herbicides on those creatures. And all the things that were brought into us were actually had died on their own. So we weren't going out collecting birds by shooting them. They were collected over time.
And these specimens are headed to the stucco building?
They are headed to the basement of the stucco and library building, yeah.
And they've been in Hinchman House.
That's right.
So what will be in the space in Hinchman House once those things are moved?
Well, what we're really excited is we can open that space up for once and actually have some classroom space downstairs or some space downstairs to use for programming in the wintertime. We really don't, we have quite a few buildings, but we really don't have a place where kids and students can get together. We have a little bit of space in the first floor of the Hinchman House, but this will open it up for us and be able to do more programming and have more overflow space, on a rainy day on Nantucket. All of our programs are outside, so it's nice to have a place we can bring kids inside.
And as it stands now, how much goes on at Hinchman House in the wintertime?
Yeah. Well, the Hinchman houses all of our interns, at least in the summertime. So in the wintertime, we'll bring in outside groups. We might, for instance, for a long time, we brought in Worcester Polytech, came in, and they did projects around the island, and we housed them. They did projects for us. We'll be able to use that to do other groups as well throughout the winter. We bring in kids from Bennington College, from Charlemont Academy in Western Massachusetts to do programming in the winter. So we use that space for classroom space, for sleeping space in the winter.
Before we go, there's an important anniversary coming up. Tell us about that.
That's right, yeah. Well, we're really excited. It's the 200th anniversary of Mariah Mitchell's birthday in 1818. And we've got lots and lots of great programming that we're going to be involved with this summer. But it really is a monumental year.
Your website address is?
Yeah, mariahmitchell.org. And we really keep it very current. People can sign up to receive the e-comment, which gives all the information about different projects we're doing, classes, research updates. So it's a good resource.
And you can be followed on Facebook as well.
Facebook, all the different social media posts, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Dave Gagnon, thanks for coming in.
Well, thank you.
This has been fascinating. Hope you'll come again.
I hope so.
For Coastal Matters, I'm Charlie Walters. Thanks for tuning in. Please join us next time.